You think you know someone, right? I thought the same, until one single day changed everything I believed. Imagine coming home, expecting nothing out of the ordinary, and then your entire world flips upside down. It was just like any other day. I'd left for work that morning, kissed my husband goodbye, and texted my best friend to see if she was free to grab coffee later. No signs, no clues that today would be different. But here's the thing. Sometimes, life hits you with the unexpected, even when you're not ready for it. I got a text from my boss around noon, telling me that the big meeting we'd been preparing for was cancelled. I was annoyed at first. I mean, I'd rushed all morning, preparing for something that ended up being a waste of time. But then I thought, you know what? This is actually a good thing. I decided to leave the office early and surprise my husband. I figured maybe we could go out to dinner, or at least spend some time together since we hadn't had much of that lately. So I got in my car, drove home, and was in a pretty good mood. The whole way back, I was imagining the look on his face when I walked in early. He'd be surprised, maybe even a little confused, but I knew he'd be happy to see me. We'd probably order takeout, crack open a bottle of wine, and have a nice evening. Or at least, that's what I thought. I pulled up to the house, and everything seemed normal. His car was in the driveway, so I knew he was home. Nothing felt out of place, until I stepped through the front door. At first it was just a little too quiet. Usually, when he's home, there's some noise. Maybe the TV is on, or I hear him talking on the phone. But this time, there was nothing but silence. I called out his name, thinking maybe he was in the shower or something, but there was no response. And that's when I heard it. The faint sound of laughter coming from upstairs. My heart skipped a beat, but even then I wasn't thinking the worst. I mean, who would, right? I told myself it was probably nothing, maybe he was watching a funny video or had a friend over. But as I took a few more steps into the house, something stopped me dead in my tracks. There were 2 wine glasses on the counter, and a woman's purse sitting on the couch. It wasn't mine. I stared at that purse for a moment, my mind trying to make sense of it. It was familiar. Too familiar. It was my best friend's. I felt a chill run down my spine, but still I was in denial. Maybe she'd come over to drop something off. Maybe they were just hanging out. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm as I walked toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. The laughter upstairs grew louder, and with it, so did the sinking feeling in my stomach, but I kept telling myself I was overreacting. They wouldn't. They couldn't. Not my husband, not my best friend. We'd known each other for years, all of us. They were the 2 people I trusted most in the world. The idea that they could betray me like that just didn't make sense. As I reached the top of the stairs, I stopped again, listening. There was more laughter, but this time I heard something else. Something that made my skin crawl. It was the sound of whispers, soft and intimate. I knew those voices too well. My legs felt like they were going to give out, but somehow I managed to walk down the hallway toward our bedroom. The door was cracked open, just enough for me to peek inside. And that's when I saw them. There they were, my husband and my best friend lying in our bed. They were tangled in the sheets, laughing, completely oblivious to the fact that I was standing there, watching them. My mind went blank. For a few seconds I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. It felt like the world had stopped spinning. This couldn't be real. This had to be a nightmare, but it wasn't. It was happening right in front of me. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, frozen in place. My brain was struggling to process what my eyes were seeing. It felt like a bad dream. One of those moments where everything is so surreal that you're convinced it can't be happening, but it was. My husband, the man I'd built a life with, and my best friend, the one person I trusted more than anyone else, were lying together in our bed, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I wanted to burst into the room and demand an explanation, but my legs wouldn't move. My whole body felt numb, like I was floating outside of myself, watching everything unfold from a distance. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears, drowning out every other sound. Time seemed to slow down, and for a moment I thought maybe if I just closed the door and walked away, I could pretend it hadn't happened, that I could go back to the way things were too. The life I thought I had, but there was no going back. Not after this. Finally, I managed to take a step back and the floor creaked beneath my foot. That tiny noise was all it took to break the spell. They both looked up at the same time, their eyes wide with shock. My husband's face went pale, and my best friend. She just stared at me, her mouth slightly open, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. For a second none of us said anything. We were all frozen, caught in this horrible moment where everything was out in the open. And there was no way to take it back. Then my husband scrambled out of bed, tripping over the sheets as he tried to pull his pants on. He started stammering. "I can explain. This isn't what it looks like." But the words sounded ridiculous even as they came out of his mouth. He knew, just like I did, that there was no explanation. There was nothing he could say that would make this better. Nothing that could undo what I just seen. I looked at my best friend. She was still sitting there clutching the blanket to her chest, her face bright red with embarrassment or guilt or maybe both. She didn't say a word, not a single apology, not even an attempt to explain herself. She just sat there staring at me, as if she was waiting for me to tell her what to do. In that moment, everything felt so small. The life I thought I had, the friendships I thought were solid, it all crumbled around me. The woman I'd shared countless secrets with, the person who'd been there for me through thick and thin had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And the man I'd promised to spend the rest of my life with, he'd thrown everything away. For what? A fling, a moment of weakness. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My throat felt like it was closing up and my hands were shaking. I just turned around, walked out of the room, and headed for the front door. My husband was calling after me, begging me to stop, to talk, to let him explain, but I couldn't hear him. Everything was muffled, like I was underwater. I got into my car, slammed the door, and sat there for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the house that had once felt like my safe haven. The place where I thought I could always return to after a long day. Now it felt foreign, like it wasn't mine anymore. How could it be when the two people I trusted most had turned it into the setting for their betrayal? I started the car and drove without any destination in mind. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't care. I just needed to get away from that house, from the people inside it, from the memories that now felt tainted and broken. I ended up at a park, the one where we used to take walks on the weekends. It was a place that had always felt peaceful to me, but now it felt like a cruel reminder of the life I thought I had. I parked the car and sat there, watching people walk by with their kids and their dogs, laughing and chatting like everything was fine in their worlds. I felt like a ghost, like I didn't belong in that normal, happy scene anymore. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my husband, of course. I ignored the call, then another and another. He texted me 2 long, rambling messages about how he was sorry, how it was a mistake, how he loved me and didn't want to lose me. But it was too late, the damage was done. I don't know how long I sat there in that car staring at the phone as the messages kept coming in. Part of me wanted to reply, to scream at him, to tell him exactly how much he had destroyed. But the other part of me was just empty. I had nothing left to say to him. I had given him everything, my trust, my love, my loyalty, and he had thrown it all away. Like it meant nothing. Eventually, the texts stopped. I guess he realized I wasn't going to respond. I turned off my phone, leaned back in the seat, and closed my eyes. For the first time since walking in on them, I let myself cry. The tears came in a wave, hot and heavy until I couldn't breathe. It felt like everything inside me was breaking apart, like I was unraveling piece by piece. I don't know how long I stayed there, crying in the car. When the tears finally stopped, I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and told myself I had to face reality. I couldn't stay in that park forever, hiding from the truth. I had to go back eventually, had to deal with what had happened, but I knew one thing. For sure. I wasn't going back to that house, not with him there, not after what I'd seen. So I drove to my sister's place. She was the only person I could think of who would understand, who wouldn't ask too many questions or try to fix things. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't say a word. She just pulled me into a hug, and for the first time that day, I felt a little less alone. In the days that followed, everything changed. I moved out of the house, blocked my husband and my so-called best friend from every part of my life and started the process of rebuilding. It wasn't easy, and some days it still isn't. But if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that you can't control what people do. You can only control how you respond. As much as it hurt, walking away was the best thing I could have done for myself. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild, and I wasn't about to let myself stay in a situation where I would always be second-guessing everything. Now, I'm focused on me. Healing, rediscovering what makes me happy, and surrounding myself with people who truly care about me. It's a slow process, but it's worth it. Because at the end of the day, I deserve better. We all do. If you've ever been through something like this, just know you deserve better too.